Hang on a minute. I'm just eating the sadness bowl. I'm man enough to admit it.
Hey! We screwed up!
I read Spock's World before The Wounded Sky. And I learned about my mistake about halfway through. They can each be read independently of the other, as Spock's World isn't a sequel to The Wounded Sky. But it's more rewarding to read The Wounded Sky first, just because of continuity reasons. So, anyways, The Wounded Sky. So the Enterprise plays host to K'Tilk, a unique experimental physicist. She's a Hamalki, which is a kind of glass spider-looking alien. Using basically nonsense calculations that even the Vulcans admit work, though they don't understand how, she's created something called the inversion drive, which should get the crew to the next galaxy over pretty much instantaneously. But there are problems. The back of the book mentions the Klingons, but they're in the book only very briefly. If you're looking for an action story, this is not it. It's about going where no one has gone before, more on that later, and what happens when you accidentally tear holes in the universe you live in and haven't even finished paying off yet. Let me first say that Diane Duane's prose is glorious. Evocative, at times flowery, but never purple. Here's a sample as the crew tests the inversion drive. It was dark. No sound reached Jim, no sensation. His body was gone. His mind struggled in the darkness like a limed bird to no avail. Without sound being involved, somewhere someone was screaming, a horrible, anguished, terrified howl of inconsolable loss that went on and on forever. It couldn't have been him. He was choking, trying to breathe with lungs that weren't there. Death, that's what this is. We're all dying. The darkness didn't stop, but something else about it became evident, as if he simply had been too preoccupied to notice. The darkness didn't stop, but something else about it became evident, as if he simply had been too preoccupied to notice. The darkness had stars in it, and he had a body again. She thrust along through the cold night, feeling the small stretches and contractions of her skin as she leaned away from the planet she had been orbiting, and the heat of its primary on her diminished. Soon enough now would come the deep dive into that place where starlight was stronger stuff, where the wine of it would run white-hot through her and free her for speeds she could never achieve in this calmer world. Then the true life would begin again. These tame circlings about planets were never more than times of rest between the real adventures. The great joy lay in streaking outward, forever and forever, bathed in strange starlight, in passing through the waste places in strength, exulting in her swiftness and her power, dealing with what she found. And since the joy unshared would have been empty, she had chosen companions who adventured during her times of rest, and rested while she adventured. They complemented her well. That was to be expected, for she had chosen them with great care. They desired the darkness as she did, though admittedly on a smaller scale. And even that would change someday. Some of them had the seeds of the great desire in them already, to love the journey not so much for the achievement of some purpose as for the journey itself. Several of them in particular were gradually coming to that state, the ones who sat oftenest at her heart and knew her will best, especially the chief of them, who she was slowly training up in the way he should go. To her delight, her exultation, he was learning. He had come to be aware of her selfness, to know her in the small, shadowy way of her children. He would know her better yet. She would teach him everything there was. She would raise him up to be the equal of one of her own kind. And then Jim found himself back in his seat again, shaking all over. Emergence alarms were whooping all around him, and his people were looking frantically around the bridge like statues suddenly come to life. "Status," said Jim, and counted himself lucky that the word came out as a shout and not a squeak. "We are undamaged, Captain," Spock's voice came, calm as always, from his station. "The damage control computers never even activated." Jim turned to Uhura. "Injuries?" Uhura took the translator out of her ear with the air of a woman being yammered at. "None, sir, but the crew is very upset. Whatever they were expecting inversion to be like, it wasn't that." "I can't blame them," Jim said. He was still deep in that feeling he had first experienced when Katilk showed him the drive running, with the difference that this time he remembered something of what had happened to him. Tell them we'll put a report out on ship's channels as soon as we figure out what happened. And where we are, Uhura said, glancing at the front view screen. Jim looked too, and agreed. If you're enjoying this video, why not buy my book? Flight of the Pangolin is the story of an intrepid group of heroes who decide to exit the solar system over the objections of an isolationist faction. There's actually a lot more going on than that. There's space pirates, a giant spider for no reason, all kinds of other things. Buy it now online wherever you buy books or at our website, www.thepangolinrepublic.com. You can also get fun t-shirts and random other stuff if you want. This is my second of her Star Trek books that I've read. I'll talk about Spock's World in a future episode. And I feel like, at least within my experience reading these books, she sets the bar for quality in the Star Trek novel range. The characters we know speak and act in ways that are consistent with their TV and film counterparts. And the new characters are interesting and compelling. Katilk is the star of the book. She is confident but sensible with a great sense of humor. She and Scotty get along pretty well. Most of the book is from Kirk's point of view. We only get occasional looks at their budding relationship. There's also the recreation officer, Harb Tanzer, who shows up occasionally in ways that make me wonder why every crew on these shows doesn't have a recreational officer. I never really thought about it. I won't get into spoilers, but there are land sharks and new universes and some philosophical quandaries about the ethics of creating gods. It's heavy stuff, but never boring or ponderous. The basic outline for this story was later adapted into the TNG episode, Where No One Has Gone Before. From season 1. But they're so different from each other that, aside from the most basic premise, it's hard to even compare them. I mean, sure, the Traveler's cool, but have you tried a glass spider lady? So if you're less interested in the pew-pew and more into exploring the wonders of the universe, this is a great Trek book to check out. Highly recommended. So that's it. Tune in next time when I talk about another really old book you haven't thought about in a while. Bye!